Hi, welcome to another fruitful discussion with Mrs. M. So for today, we'll have an intro discussion on fire and arson investigation. However, before proceeding to our formal discussion, it is imperative on our part to discuss first the course description and the outline for this professional subject. All right. So for fire protection and arson investigation, the course presents the creation of the Bureau of Fire Protection, its mandates, its powers and functions. It also covers the understanding of the behavior, the characteristics, and the chemistry of fire. So it involved fire safety and protection, including the conduct of arson investigation. So as you can see, based on the description provided, it gives us a whole picture, a whole idea that this subject does not focus alone on what is fire, what are the elements of fire, what are the triangle of fire, what is pyrolysis, but it gives us an idea that this subject also focus on the creation of the BFP, its powers and function, and most importantly, the arson investigation. So these are the prepared outline, okay, of the subject. So first content, what is fire? So the elements of fire, the fire triangle, the classification and the kinds and even the types of fire, the principles of fire, the stages of fire, the transmission, the transfer of heat, and the possible sources of ignition. Another, combustion and its principles, factors that influence the spread of fire, the spontaneous combustion, the flashover, the backdraft, the bite back, the flash fire, and another will also discuss RA 9514 with the emphasis on Section 1 to Section 9 of the law. Another, of course, the malimtan, is the BFP organization. As what I've said, the powers and function, the rank, the classification, the key position, the appointing authority, the initial rank classification, the waiver, all of this as what is provided in its mother law RA 6975, as amended by RA 9263 and further amended by RA 9592. Do not worry, we will also discuss the salary of the BFP, which for sure you are very much interested. Another, organization and training of fire brigades, the fire safety, the practitioners, and even the volunteers. Next outline, the fire safety enrollment enforcement functions. Next, the fire safety measures on selected division. And then we'll also discuss the fire fighting operations on selected installation, the facilities, the building, and even the structure. Next, the fire and arson investigation, the determination of the origin of fire, its cause or causes, the liability, and also the provisions of RPC on revised penal code on arson crimes involving the destruction as amended by our Presidential Decree 1613 and Presidential Decree 1744. Then another content or outline of this course is what evidence needed to establish an arson case. Another, interview and interrogation of suspects, the witnesses, the occupants, and others. And lastly, report writing. After the operation report, the status report, the investigation report, the notice to comply, the notice to correct the violation, and even the amendment order. So do not worry, the outline that I have provided does not cover the prelim period. It's way too broad. It's way too many. So this course outline which I have read earlier are the entire content for the whole semester. And for the prelim period, we will focus on what is fire until the transmission of fire, including the combustion and even the backdraft, the bite, and the flash fire. So these are the coverage for our prelim period. And if ever we still have time, then we will also include sections 1 to 9 of Republic Act 95-14. Alright, so now let's proceed to our proper discussion. So, early humans used fire to warm themselves, cook food, and even frighten predators. So, fire enabled our ancestors to travel out of warm and protect themselves against enemies. However, fire also posed a great risk and challenges to early people. Remember that in early before, unlike karon nga, all we have to do in order to produce fire is just get a lighter or even open the stove. And karon mga high tech, just use the induction, no, the induction stove in order to cook your favorite meal. Pero sa una, it is a traditional way of producing fire. Okay? Next, at present, scientists and fire engineers work together to help people use fire safely and productive. In the second sentence of the first paragraph, it mentioned here that aside from the advantages that is given by fire, there are also a lot of risk, or shall I say disadvantages. One of which is that it can harm people by unsaon man, by maburn ang ilang kaugalingon, or it can even cause a wildfire. So that is why as of present, okay, ang gibuhat is people, the BFT, okay, provides a discussion or orientation and educates the people on how to safely and properly and productively use fire. So now let's discuss what is fire. So fire is a rapid, self-sustaining oxidation process accompanied by the evolution of the heat and light of varying intensity. So it is also an active chemical reaction that takes place between the fuel, the heat, and the oxygen in the form of light and noticeable heat. Another, it is also a chemical reaction, the rapid oxidation of the fuel producing heat and light. Another is that an oxidation taking place with a rate rapid enough to produce heat and light. So as you can see, despite the different structures of definition of fire, it gives us a bottom line that fire itself is a self-sustaining oxidation process. That fire itself is a chemical reaction. That fire itself is being produced in the presence of fuel, heat, and oxygen. Okay? Next, is fire be considered as matter? Unsa ka ha? What do you think? Can it be considered as matter? So let's try to check if fire is really a matter or not. So when you say matter, class, it is anything that has a mass and even occupies space. Mass and occupies space. So let's try to look at our flame. What's a flame? So this is your flame. Okay? So, flame itself is a mixture of gases. Vaporized fuel, oxygen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, water vapor, and many other things. So which makes our flame a matter. Again, our flame, katong magsiga, okay, is considered as matter because of the mixture of gases, okay, which is produced by the vaporized fuel, oxygen, carbon monoxide, and even small amount of water vapor. So which makes again our flame matter. However, however, the light, okay, sorry. However, the light produced by the flame, again, the light that is produced by the flame is an energy. So therefore, it is not a matter. Again, the light that is produced in the flame is an energy, which make it not a matter. The heat that is produced also is considered as energy, which is not a matter. So as you can see, our fire itself is both a mixture of a matter and not a matter. So flame itself again is a matter, but the light and heat that is produced by the flame is not a matter, but rather an energy. So what is fire, guys? So as what I mentioned earlier, fire is a rapid oxidation of a material in an exothermic chemical process of burning, releasing heat, light, and various reaction product. Nano giingon diri as exothermic chemical process. Because in order to produce fire, then there is the so-called combustion or the burning of the fuels. And when a fuel is being burned, it undergoes the so-called pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is the time wherein your fuel produces, when it is subjected to continuous combustion, it produces a combustible vapor. Wherein, when the combustible vapor which is produced by the fuel is mixed with the heat and mixed with the correct amount of oxygen, it causes fire. Alright? Next, let's talk about technology. So it is the branch of knowledge that deals with the industrial arts and sciences. So the application of such knowledge that is used to produce the material necessity of the society. So there are various elements of fire or the triangle of fire. So first is you do have the fuel. Remember, I have mentioned earlier that in order to produce fire, you need to have the so-called the fuel, the oxygen, the heat, and in the latest concept, there should always be a chemical reaction. So, what is fuel? So fuel is anything that will burn when heated with sufficient oxygen. Remember that fuel can be in a form of solid, it can be in a form of gas, it can be in a form of liquid. Later, I will give you an example. Another is oxygen. Your oxygen does not burn. Kay kung ang oxygen mo burn pa, di dapat kita take matag oxygen ni burn na ta. But remember, your oxygen plays an important role in producing fire. Kaya nga naman, your oxygen aids in the combustion, aids in the burning. Therefore, even if there's heat, even if there's fuel, but without oxygen, it is too impossible to produce fire. So now let us try to look at the composition of fire. And now, the composition of oxygen. So 21% of the air is oxygen, 78% is nitrogen, and 1% are unfortunately impurities already. Okay? So what is heat? Heat is the source of ignition. Okay? That heat can be can be a candle, can be a lighter, okay, basta source of ignition. So let's try to look at examples, okay, examples of the elements that I have mentioned using the fire triangle theory. So first is that your oxygen. Okay. So we all know that oxygen is colorless. Of course. Nga naman, nakakita ba mo og oxygen? Wala. So it is colorless. Another, it is odorless. It is odorless. Natawag pag simhot nimo, basta wala rin mangutot, o wala ra po'y magpahumot, 'di ba? Natural na imuhang makuanan because again, it is odorless. And one of the composition of air, which is, as what I mentioned in the previous slide, is 21%. Okay. So, ang pangutana, if oxygen is only 21% of the air composition, what is needed man? What percent, specific percent of oxygen is needed in order to support the combustion, or in simpler term, support the burning of fire? So, una, if it is only 12%, therefore, it is an insufficient percentage of oxygen. Therefore, no fire ang mahitabo. Okay? Another, if it is 14%, it only causes flashpoint. If it is 21%, it causes the fire point. So, therefore, if you do have in between 14 to 16% of oxygen, then it is already enough to support the burning or to support the combustion of fire. Another, what is heat? As what I have mentioned earlier, it is the source of ignition. So one good example of the source of heat is this one, palito, pusporo. Okay? This can also be an example, cricket lighter, or even a candle. Another is fuel. Okay? So, fuel is a substance that react chemically with your oxygen. So, as what I have mentioned earlier, your fuel can be a liquid, a solid, okay, can even be an example of a gas. So, for this one, this can also be considered as fuel, as long as we consider it as an example of a liquid fuel. Okay, another example of a fuel is for the solid, you do have wood, paper, pwede pud balay ninyo, palayo simbako. That is still an example of a fuel. Okay, gas, asa man, kanang gasolina sa motor is an example of a fuel as well. Okay? Isa pa may gusto yung example of fuel nga solid. Aparador, cellphone. These are examples of fuel. Laptop, cellphone, example of fuel. But as much as possible, ayaw mo ang fuel kay it's very expensive. Okay? So now, let's talk about the triangle of fire. So, ang triangle of fire is the first theory that has been utilized in order to explain how the fire is being produced, and also utilized to explain how to extinguish or eliminate fire. So for many years, the fire triangle, which is a composition of oxygen, fuel, and heat, was taught as the components of fire. So while this simple explanation is useful, it is not technically correct. Kaya nga naman, it lacks the fourth element in order to really understand fire. So that is why from fire triangle, it was changed into fire tetrahedron, or the tetrahedron of fire. So it is a geometric representation of what is required for fire to exist. Namely, the fuel, which is again an oxidizing agent. Usbo na ko og explain nganong ang fuel nato gitawag man siyang oxidizing agent. Gitawag siyang oxidizing agent because it undergoes the so-called pyrolysis. Therefore, your fuel must be heated first. Heated first. properly, okay, sufficiently, in order for the fuel to produce the combustible vapor. It is the combustible vapor that is mixed with your oxygen and mixed with a sufficient amount of heat, okay, that causes the chemical reaction, okay, that causes in the production of fire, okay. Another, heat and the uninhibited chemical reaction, which is the fire tetrahedron. Okay, so unsa may buot pasabot ani? Unsa may buot pasabot ani that in your fire tetrahedron, it has four elements: your fuel, fuel, your heat, your oxygen, and your so-called chemical reaction or uninhibited chemical reaction. Unsa may buot pasabot ana that your chemical reaction or uninhibited chemical reaction will only become present if you do have fuel, if you do have heat, and if you do have the correct amount of oxygen. If these first three elements are present, therefore, your chemical reaction becomes present. Unsa may buot pasabot? If there is already chemical reaction, therefore, there is already fire. In order for you to extinguish or to somehow eliminate fire, you need to remove any of the three basic elements. Okay? But it is so impossible to remove oxygen. So, kinahanglan, it's either of the two lang ang imong eliminate. It's either you eliminate the fuel in order to disrupt the chemical reaction, or you can eliminate heat in order to disrupt the chemical reaction. Okay? So, for your assignment, I want you to... Okay, assignment ta. Okay, so for your assignment, kindly write your insights in today's discussion. And then your second assignment is, what is okay? So, these are your assignment for today. Again, kindly write your insights in today's discussion. Then, what is pyrolysis? Okay? All you have to do is to write your answer on the comment section. I'll be checking. Okay? So, bye guys, and see you in our next discussion.